Hello everybody and welcome to this gap funding webinar from the South African Chamber of Commerce. I'm Mike Miller. I'm one of the founders of the South African Chamber of Commerce back in 2004. It took us 5 years to get it up and running. And we launched at South Africa House in February 2009 and then merged with the South African Business Club in 2011. And the chamber has grown dramatically since then. Is now dealing with governments both in the UK and South Africa. Rewilding Africa is an initiative from the South African Chamber, and you will hear today from lots of really powerful speakers on conservancy. Now, today we're going to be talking about one particular conservancy, which is Laziba. So without further ado, let me pass on to one of the person who's been most passionate about this, about the Laziba, which is James Arnott. James, over to you.
Thank you, Mike. Good afternoon, everybody. For those who've tuned in, really appreciate it, and thank you for all our speakers. Thank you for that introduction, Mike. If you can imagine every national park in Africa having a Thrive buffer zone around it, where communities prosper from conservation, communities are less motivated to poach or damage their wildernesses, and every single national park around on the continent has a community conservancy established on it that protects it, ultimately protects it through creating livelihoods. And that's kind of what we're talking about today, and the speakers after me will give their angle and perspective. But if we can get this right, certainly this initial slide is that there has to be a massive paradigm shift in current strategy, which we are advocating and promulgating through Rewilding Africa here in the UK. And we have our implementation arm, African Conservancies in South Africa, to implement. So we believe passionately in our model, which is essentially the planning, development, and management of what we term multiple land use, multiple revenue stream, Thrive buffer community conservancies. And as mentioned, these are surrounding national parks. It then creates the investment framework for conservancy businesses and the building of what we term a conservation economy for Africa, which at macro level has such huge strategic importance. We have already identified a pipeline that by 2034, across 8 different countries, we would like to develop 25 community conservancies. As Mike mentioned, we have our flagship pilot proof of concept already on the go in the form of Laziba Community Conservancy and the Wildlife Reserve in its heart, which Grant will go through later. Just to give you a taste of where we intend developing these conservancies as an initial pipeline, obviously we would love Africa to embrace the concept and every country, just like the national parks was a key initiative of the 20th century. You know, we believe that the 21st century is all about community conservancies because it brings the communities into the conservation economy. So that gives you a taste of where we would like to develop these conservancies. A brief slide in terms of, and bear in mind this is illustrative, the park in the middle being non-consumptive, and that's generally the revenue streams that come from that are tourism based. And then surrounding the park in the conservancy consumptive areas, you have elements like ecotourism, game farming, renewable energy, high value, low impact agriculture. And a key component of each conservancy we believe is quite powerful is to develop a hub where the offices, the kind of the brain center of the conservancy will position itself. And there'll be processing sheds and educational opportunities for the community through setting up incubators and ongoing monitoring and mentoring. So that's just a typical slide of a community conservancy. In practical application, this map shows you a biodiversity node in KwaZulu-Natal, South Africa. And you can see on the left-hand side there, Laziba Wildlife Reserve, which is the 35,000 hectare reserve we've already started to develop through a special purpose company setup. And then around it, the Community Conservancy buffer zone, which we haven't proceeded with due to lack of funding. And then to our right, a more famous example, a more typical example of what we want to roll out into Africa would be Mfolozi Park, which, as Grant will testify to, is under immense threat from poaching, especially the rhino populations. So the whole concept of the Community Conservancies is involving the surrounding communities into the economy. And that pink area would essentially be the Mfolozi Community Conservancy. And you can imagine that being replicated throughout Africa. That's a typical, what we term the 3 pillars of our development program. And bear in mind that between Grant and I, we've had circa 50 years of property development, consumer marketing, conservation, frontline conservation, community engagement. So, this 4-year in the making model has a fair amount of experience behind it. But critically, the first pillar is planning. Now, without planning, you have nothing. And that planning starts on a very patient level with the communities themselves, in terms of going into the communities and finding out how they would like to see their land being used for. And then slowly building up a model, which then gets put through a more technical process with our professional team, which includes town planning, specialist socioeconomic studies, land use plans, rewilding. All of those aspects get taken into account to then ultimately come up with what we term a spatial development framework, which is then becomes the Bible for the development of that community conservancy. Using that as the basis, then we go into the development phase and we put bulk services in place. We construct the conservancy hub. As I mentioned, we do some rewilding. And then importantly, this now becomes the framework for developing the businesses. This is the conservation economy platform or canvas that we so critically need. And those business incubators and existing farms, businesses will then place themselves on that conservancy in partnership with the communities and start creating conservation livelihoods. And then the third pillar, as importantly, is the management. That's not just the management of the conservancy. We're talking about mentoring, we're talking about business skills, we're talking about building scale across Africa through an interconnected network of community conservancies. How it could work, which is why the whole theme of this presentation. We've obviously got Rewilding Africa, which is a CIC based here in the UK. Its mandate is to create global awareness for Africa community-based conservation. Our payoff line is investing in Africa's wilderness communities, and obviously raising the funds. And then an initiative that Simon will go through after me, which is we propose what we need is significant funding. And the way we can achieve that is through a blend of philanthropic, carbon credit, CSI, private investor, and we believe that can all be consolidated in the form of an impact fund and also a bond, and Ezra will go take you through his logic there, in a place like Jersey, which is a tax-friendly environment. And that fund would then deploy to project level to develop these conservancies according to the program project timeline and budget, which dictates via the planning, development, and management process. The implementation, we have a company set up in South Africa, as mentioned initially, where that company will then appoint the professional team, appoint the socio-economic workers who go out and communicate with the communities, and that would be the implementation in terms of our model. I won't delve on this, ladies and gentlemen, but this is a burning issue. I personally have experienced immense biodiversity destruction. We all know how endangered a lot of our species are. If we don't do something different, if we do not create alternative opportunities for these communities, they will continue to poach. They will continue to destroy the habitat that they live in, and ultimately put the actual future of the parks themselves under threat. So this is a big burning issue, and it's a global issue. It's something that obviously Africa needs and the rest of the world need. I was on a webinar earlier today with Uzbekistan, believe it or not, presenting the community conservancy model, and they also want to embrace something that has the community at heart, which creates livelihoods, which ultimately then protects biodiversity. To finish off, a little formula: community conservancies equals planning, and there are no shortcuts here. Planning plus development plus management which then ultimately achieves, and I know COP28 is assembled in Dubai this year, and hopefully they'll reinforce the 30 by 30, which is about 30% of the land mass around the world being under conservation management. Community conservancies will get us very close to those goals, certainly in the African context and certainly global, and also achieving of most of the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, in terms of human growth alongside nature. A parting point, community conservancies, arguably the 21st century's most important intervention. And in terms of simultaneously creating livelihoods as a foundation to building of an African conservation economy. Thank you, Mike. That's it from me. Over to you again.
As you've seen from what James has been saying, there's a need for funding to come into to Rewilding Africa to help do this. I know Grant was talking, and I've spoken previously to Spugiani, who's a local community leader who is desperate to get things moving forward. And in order to do that, as James has said, we will need the funding to come in, specifically with the first project, which is the Zebra. I might make a point right now, which is that if you want to donate, I'd love everybody who's on this call, on this webinar, to actually donate or to show their interest by going into rewildingafrica.org.uk, clicking on the donate button and donate whatever you like, and just, put it in there, because we then have you as a record of somebody who is supporting us, which is going to be extremely useful. Okay, James will be talking later on about another way to donate. Now we're going to go on to talk to Simon Kennedy. Simon Kennedy will introduce himself as to his background, but he's going to talk about how you set up an impact fund and what we can do. Simon, over to you.
Thank you very much, Mike, and hello, everyone. So my name is Simon Kennedy. I'm an environmental economist, and I'm helping James and Grant out with this fantastic initiative. I'm not going to go into details around how one actually goes about setting up an impact fund. I would like to rather just go over some of the key principles, acknowledging that we are at quite an early stage of this. So just to start off by saying that the purpose really of this impact fund is to provide a centralized platform with which to collect and then manage and distribute funds from a variety of different sources, blended finance, really. We think that this centralized fund is quite important because it can give us this flexibility to do that. To base it, where to base it? James mentioned earlier that we would seek to base it in an investor and tax-friendly region, such as Jersey. We'd also be looking at Guernsey or Isle of Man, and then to set one up. I think setting it up can be seen in two stages, really. The first is designing and packaging and understanding and establishing the governance and procedures. The second would be registration and setting it up in a physical way. I think the first point is quite a tricky one, because one would really need to get it right. You would need FCA approval. You need to find the right partners. You need the right investment expertise. And we do want to get this right. We also acknowledge that we are at quite an early stage of this. So we are very open to suggestions and advice, potential opportunities for collaboration, particularly when it comes to this impact fund. So that's really just the kind of crux of the impact fund. I'd also like to kind of dive into potentially the funding sources that would go into this impact fund. And the real message here is that this would be a blend. We expect multiple financial sources here. The more, the merrier. As mentioned, this impact fund would offer the flexibility to receive from this variety of financial sources and then distribute it accordingly. So we would look at philanthropic, CSR investments, grant funds, things like that. And we think that these kind of donations would be really, really important source of catalytic funding. So funding that really can spark this process, that can really get this project going to the further phases of the project. Those further phases later down the line, we expect perhaps more involvement from impact investors. So potentially those looking for financial returns in addition to ecological and socioeconomic returns. I know Ezra will be talking about impact bonds a bit later. But I think we're also finding ourselves in a really interesting space in recent times with the rise of innovative finance streams. James mentioned earlier carbon credits, payment for ecosystem services. These are all growing concepts which we'd be really interested to tap into. Really, the more the merrier, the more kind of multiple streams of finance, the better for us. We think the Impact Fund could cater for that. And I think those are kind of the key points I'd like to raise just in terms of the Impact Fund. We also have a few points related to around the different phases of planning and implementation. But I think I might keep that for a later stage. So that's all for now, and I can pass back to you, Mike.
Great, thank you so much, Simon. You'll notice that Simon talks there about one very key element, which is corporate social responsibility and the need for companies to be seen to be involved. And a lot of the companies have actually got CSR funds that are looking to invest. What's interesting is that I'm an accountant who's accountant for both personally and for all my companies. And it's a chap called Anthony Platt of Thames Bridge Accounting. And he's been in investing in Endangered Wildlife Trust, £40 a month for several years now. And I said to him the other day, why? Why are you actually doing this? And he said, because I went down there and I actually saw what was actually happening. And I just felt that I needed to get involved. And also, it's very good to be seen to be doing something with our CSR fund. So bear that in mind in terms of going forward. Right, next, I think what we'll do is, if Ezra, if you're ready, we'll talk to you, can talk about how the academic people can get involved. Ezra, over to you.
Thank you, Mike. Thanks everyone for inviting me here today. I'm really delighted to be here. James has asked me really just to talk about two elements. The one is really to looking at it, answering the question, how can academia play a role with this RWA initiatives? And now I'm really looking at it from the perspective of social entrepreneurship and finance, and looking at the various mechanisms that are available, that are used to fund sustainability type projects. And part of the academic interest, and I think how academia can play a role is, and just a bit of context, I've really been researching this, talking to various people and interviewing them and trying to get an understanding of also where all those pinch points are. Now, what struck me is that, first of all, that this model is quite unique, what's being proposed, and it does differ from the normal approach. So there is a change of mindset that's required. And I think from an academic perspective, that's probably a good place to start, because not only within the way conservation is practiced, is I think the way, if you start within the academic work, we can actually start putting forward evidence-based arguments that challenge the current paradigm and the way of thinking. And so that's perhaps one of the first ways in which that academia can play a role. The other way is also, I think Rewilding Africa offers a very unique opportunity to academia in terms of this is an innovation in the normal the types of models and the way these sustainability projects are funded. And so there is an academic angle here that is of interest. And so through that engagement, I think that, and using Rewilding Africa as looking at it under the microscope, and hopefully what will come of that is that we will provide, start publishing some academic research, and then from that might also raise the profile of Rewilding Africa, which is certainly what we're hoping to do. So it's really looking at how, if you look at historically how financial social innovation has evolved the field, and this is a financial social innovation in terms of, previously there's this microfinance, and then we've got these things, other mechanisms of P2P lending and crowdfunding, and then something that kind of started out in South Africa, the mobile banking, impact investing, I think, some of the digital currencies that were developed. But what's evolved are these area called social impact bonds, and although not totally new, it is kind of still in its infancy relative to the other mechanisms that have been used. And it really kind of began and was used in the prison system. But what it does, it provides a mechanism that brings together different sets of stakeholders. It brings in together the outcomes, the societal stakeholders, the investors, the implementers, and then the evaluators. And so it has the various different elements to it that actually can be used in financing this gap funding that James is speaking about, particularly for the planning and development, or phase one. Just a bit of background on impact bonds. Impact bonds have typically been around, and more recently I did a search. You'll see that impact bonds have actually, there's very limited application of them within poverty eradication and agriculture and environmental. And so why we're interested in looking at it from this perspective is that this Rewilding Africa has a combination of those two elements, and it provides that mechanism where you can combine these multi-stakeholder partnerships, and that you can link these to the SDGs. And I think what Simon had done as part of his work is developed the theory of change, which is really an important element of that creates that linkage between the outcomes of what rewilding is doing and the SDGs. It only seems to have been applied to policy sectors since 2021. And so there's this absence of research and questions that focus particularly around the financial risk and return decision making. And so therefore, from this academic perspective, we think that there's something to be explored in this domain, but at the same time, in quite an impactful way, because it can be used to help fund that finance or that funding gap that Rewilding Africa requires. I think the second question that we want to look at from a academic perspective is the question I've been asking: what are the biggest challenges that Rewilding Africa has raising the impact funding? And I think, just on a practical level, the fact that it's got these dual outcomes, there's a social outcome and an impact and a financial return that's required. But the problem is that there's this runway period. As James mentioned, he said they've got a proof of concept and they're trying to get it to a prototype stage. And that period requires investment, but it's more about, there's a lot of exploration. So there's no immediate financial return. And so there's this kind of this catch-22 that you can't get to your prototype because you can't get the funding to get the POC there, but you can't get the funding. So and that's really what we're trying to do, that we're trying to explore other ways, and one of the angles is that he's looking at it from an academic lens to see if there's another way that we can innovate on current and existing known financial mechanisms, that we can then use this as one of the tools in that toolbox that falls within that umbrella of the impact fund. And so that's really, I just wanted to share that element. So if anybody's on the call who's interested and has an academic as well as an investment banking interest in this, because the typical players or the stakeholders are, you need an intermediary, you've got the Rewilding Africa or the CIC or the South African implementation arm. They would be able to provide the actual delivery, the implementation, There are various bodies who identify the, from a conservation perspective, what the outcomes that you want to measure, and then we look to a UN or a World Bank or as a philanthropic stakeholder. So that's all from my side, and really I hope that everybody can really get behind this, because this is a really important project and it does need a new, fresh way of thinking. Thank you.
That was great, thank you. One of the things that Ezra mentioned was the need for research. At the moment, I mentioned earlier that we've got the matriarch of the local elephant herd, Mafuta, who requires protection. And there needs to be a lot of research into ways that we can actually do this, apart from just the natural training game rangers to actually get rid of the poachers. And Spugiani, a local community leader, has just said we need this to happen. So as I said to you earlier, if we would like you to get involved, and the way you can do that is by donating whatever you can donate to the fund. We're now going to go on to, and as I mentioned earlier, Anthony Platt had actually been to a conservancy. That's why he's donating and has been donating £40 a month to the Endangered Wildlife Trust, which is another conservancy in South Africa. And I think that what we can do now is go on to talk to Dominic Webb, and he's going to talk about tours, because as I said, Anthony went to South Africa. He is South African from Durban. He went to South Africa and he saw what was happening, and that's how he got involved and is still involved to this day. Dominic, over to you.
Mike, thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone, ladies and gentlemen. So just a quick introduction on myself. So I run a company called Rewilding Africa, which is a specialist tour operator based in Southern Africa. We deal specifically in philanthropic, educational, and sustainable travel experiences for individuals, mainly groups, schools, universities, businesses. There was mention of CSR earlier. We work with a lot of companies wanting to experience a different side of Africa, very much the internal workings, the community-driven side of things, and very much sort of centered around the SDGs and the global goals. So we work with a number of communities across a number of destinations, using tourism-generated income for development purposes. So we are officially a tour operator, a tourism company, but our model is very much using tourism for the positive development purposes of African social, economic, and environmental growth. So yeah, I mean, a couple of points from our side, really. Mike mentioned, the anecdote about his accountant. There is a very clear correlation between investment, fundraising, and first-hand experiences. COVID very sadly put a huge impact in the sort of delay and with individuals, companies, and organizations being able to travel. So thankfully we're getting back on our feet, and people are having the chance now to get back out there. And this form of tourism, the conservation development side of things, is absolutely paramount to the growth and development. And getting interested parties out there in the field, on the ground, to see firsthand what is going on is absolutely paramount for success of projects like these. I think also touching on a point that Ezra made, the challenge on monetizing investment and a return of investment. Very difficult to raise capital and funds when that there is no sort of financial gain or certainly sort of a clear ROI on funds. So I think that that's one of the areas that we come in as a travel provider, offering travel experiences to investors and to the ambassador scheme. So by offering the experience and the knowledge and the connections that will be made through, shared experiences through these trips. And so certainly from a travel perspective, hopefully it can be one of the channels, one of the means of raising capital and investment through an offering that is being given to them. So yeah, certainly as the travel partner, I think I'm one of the newest members of the team. But certainly, given our model and our experience in Africa, hopefully we can certainly, offer some positive and productive tours and trips for people joining up and being part of RWA in the future. So yeah, thanks very much, and Mike, back to you.
Thanks very much, Dominic. Much appreciated. So, in other words, what you need to do, if you can, is get out there and see what's actually happening, because it'll make the whole thing come to life a lot better. But in the meantime, you've heard some really good stuff from lots of experts in the field. We're now going to talk to someone who's a real expert in conservancy. He's lectured on conservancy all over the world. I was talking to him earlier about this, and his CV is so incredible, it's unbelievable in terms of what he's actually been able to achieve. So this is Grant Foles. He will say a bit more about himself and will introduce what we're all about. And there's another video to come which shows what's going to happen with him. Grant, over to you.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you for that intro. I don't know if the CV is fraudulently read out by you, but I feel I'm still learning conservation, and I've been in it for many decades, and it's a pleasure to be on this Zoom in front of all these people and to talk about changing our planet for the better, while everybody in the world is trying to destroy it. I'm coming to you live from Loziba at the moment, actually. In the bush and beating load shedding by actually in the Nkau Vervet project, which is also quite an interesting project, actually, where it's the biggest and oldest monkey research facility for vervet monkeys in Africa. And it's based here on Mawana Game Reserve, which is part of Loziba. And when people mention monkeys, they all say, I hate the bloody things, let's shoot them. And you cannot believe the research that goes into this thing. And we're talking about education and academics and all that, and everything from DNA to dung sampling to everything. And believe it or not, it's all about rewilding. These monkeys are not habituated. They're 244, the largest group of monkeys in Africa, being researched on language, touchscreen, robotics, food. And the biggest troop that they have is 83. So why I'm telling you this is because I'm actually sitting in their research center to get a Wi-Fi signal. And serendipitously, we're talking about changing landscapes, And rewilding Africa, or any rewilding Europe, or rewilding Chile or Patagonia, is all about just aiming to restore healthy ecosystems in our wild, diverse spaces, using animals and plants, and the human intervention that we have destroyed, we are trying to repair through sustainable means. Everything from the Sustainable Development Goals to gender equality to education, bringing back endangered species. And we have to do this project, or these projects, at scale. Now, I realize that one of my learned friends on here, I don't know if he's planning to take the mickey out of me, Robin Brown, he's saying, how big is Loziba? And it's actually, to make it sound wow, and I'm going to give it to him in acres, it's actually 86,000 acres. But what we need of more of these 80,000 acres is these are just incubators. These are places where we're learning to do things like Africa Parks or Peace Parks or the Northernlands Rangelands Trust, at scale, where all the teething problems and the poaching problems and the tech and the research is done on a level where we can manage it, taking it to areas of millions of hectares, like Africa Parks are running 22 million hectares now in Africa, doing a wonderful job. So that's the definition of rewilding. And yeah, it's effective because it brings back keystone species. Rewilding does prevent natural disasters, and it's actually a huge benefit to local communities via the tourism model. It can reverse the 6th mass extinction on our planet. I can carry on for days. So this project is really a brainchild of a late friend of mine, Bayes Kutsia, who was killed by an elephant on this very property, and he lay his life down for us to restore it. So James and I have been involved, and many of you have come on board since then, and I really take my hat off to you for supporting us, even from the forest regions of the world. I'm standing here at Luziba Wildlife Reserve, one of our new rewilding landscapes. Isn't this just amazing? Now, if you join the ambassador program at rewild.org.uk, you can have a small membership towards preserving this landscape and others in Africa. So please, we need your help here to sustain our biodiversity in Africa and stop wildlife crime, save endangered species, and every one of your newsletters will be answered if you enroll to the ambassador program. Thank you so much for your support. Over and out from Africa.
Great, thanks, Grant. That was good. Really good. Now, one of the things you will have noticed that Grant is standing in Luziba, but there wasn't an animal in sight. Part of this is due to the fact that animals try and protect themselves by making sure they're in packs or herds, and and bearing in mind that they are in danger, not just of their own species, but also in danger from poachers. And one of the things that we want to do with Luziba and other conservancies is to make sure that we involve the local community with all the stuff that we're doing. And Spugiani, the local leader, agreed to that entirely. Now, this means training people, means building schools, having the right teachers to go in and do the work that needs to be done, and particularly to train game rangers to get them to understand that looking after the local environment and the local animals is something that is going to be good for them. So we're able, if we do it properly, to actually build employment. We can have hotels in the area. We can do all sorts of stuff, but we need your support. So all I wanted you to do, Grant has already spoken about the ambassador program. Go into rewilding.org.uk and show your support by joining the ambassador program, by donating some funds. Feel free to let us know what you think of what we're doing, okay, by coming back to us and telling us what you think. All right. And now over to James. He's got a very exciting project that he wants to talk about.
Thank you, Mike. What I've been doing as a side project, and I'm now involved as the business development manager, in fact, for a very dynamic startup here in the United Kingdom called Zambezi.app, is to try and harness the power of mobile technology for charities. And Rewilding Africa has agreed to be the trial charity. We've gone through an MVP stage, and now we are very proud to launch a Rewilding Africa mobile app, and it's available on Google Play and App Store. So please, for those of you out there who want to support, you've got the choice of becoming an ambassador, and we welcome you to go online and sign up there. or even simpler, go to the Google App Store if you're an Android Samsung user, or an iPhone, to the App Store. You'll see Zambezi app there. It takes you a minute to download the app. For those of you who support other charities in the United Kingdom, sorry, please, if I can say, it's only available in the United Kingdom at this point. You can also store all your favorite charities in a folder, and there's a budgeting tool, so you know exactly what you're supporting, whether it's the Red Cross and Rewilding Africa. So it's a really fun little tool that Rewilding Africa has helped develop. And you know, to top it all, we can also send messages to you. So, for example, if there's a donation, a volunteering opportunity at Laziba, and you've got the app on your phone, you'll get a little message, bling, we're looking for a volunteer, and we can do polling on it. We can also send you messages, keep you up to date. So yeah, a really fun, exciting little tool. And please go ahead and download it. I do spend a lot of my time in my third home, which is Zambia. And I've managed to agree with one of the leading safari operators in Zambia, a company called Green Safaris, also who share our values in terms of conservation-minded travel. They have kindly given us a prize to their luxury lodge on the Lower Zambezi, called Sausage Tree, and it's the prize is worth thousands of pounds. And you will be entered into a draw if you go online, download the app, and donate a minimum of £10. So it's not a lot of money. I'm asking you guys, as I said, it's unfortunately only available for our supporters in the United Kingdom. That's at this point. But another fun way of contributing to our initiative. And as Grant, I think, said, is every little bit helps. We have spoken about the Gap Impact Funding Challenge, and that's a lot of money. Now, the budgets for a typical conservancy is a significant amount. But your once-off donation or your subscription will help us continue to advocate and continue to source that level of funding. So every little bit helps, ladies and gentlemen. And Laziba is our pilot project in South Africa. We have so many needs there, whether it's looking after the 40-odd elephants. Mike spoke about Mafuta as the lead matriarch. We've been protecting those elephants now for years from a stay of execution, whilst we're trying to find the money to develop the game reserve, which is in the heart of the conservancy. And your money will go to that. So I thank you all. Mike, I think it's over to you, but hopefully you guys can get online and download the app. Cheers.
Thank you, everybody, for joining this webinar today. It's the latest in a series of webinars from the South African Chamber of Commerce, and I must admit, I've attended lots, and they're really quite brilliant. Your feedback is going to be quite useful to see what you feel about it all. So if you can feedback to us, that would be great. In the meantime, Stuart, are there any questions that you're aware of?
How do you create a biodiversity credit that will actually trade, and in what markets?
Who would like to answer that question from a financial point of view? Simon?
Yeah, sure. Happy to have a go. I think it's a really exciting space, but to be frank, I think it's too soon. The market is too in its infancy to really be a viable option right now. But I think it's something to keep really cognizant of going forward. Biodiversity, just by definition, it's such a complex system, and to attach financial outcomes to it is inherently a very difficult task. But I understand there are a number of institutions and networks trying to go about addressing this, trying to place certainty, trying to implement a very clear structure to how to do this. So I think short answer there is one, to really be aware of going forward. But as an immediate solution, there isn't anything in place that's strong enough, in my opinion.
Great, thanks very much, Simon. On behalf of the South African Chamber, I'd like to thank you for attending, and we're well within the time limits, which is great. but your feedback is going to be great. In the meantime, everybody, please go either download the Zambezi app or go to rewildingafrica.org.uk and show your interest by donating, whatever it might be. James talked about £10. If you can do £10, even if you can do £10 a month, that would be great. And if you've got any doubts about it, please get back to us and tell us why, because we want to make sure this thing goes forward in the way that it deserves to. Thank you, everybody. Thanks very much, and goodbye.